Hello everyone. Today we will discuss chapter 12, State and Varna Society in the Age of the Buddha. Material life. The picture of the material life in North India, especially in eastern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, can be drawn on the basis of Pali texts and Sanskrit Sutra literature in combination with archaeological evidence. Archaeologically, the 6th century BC marks the beginning of the NBP phase. The abbreviation of NBP stands for Northern Black Polished Ware, which was very glossy, shining type of pottery. This pottery was made of very fine fabric and apparently served as the tableware of richer people. In association with this pottery are found iron implements, especially those meant for crafts and agriculture. This phase also saw the beginning of metallic money. The use of burned bricks and ring wells appeared in the middle of the NBP phase, that is, in the 3rd century BC. The NBP phase marked the beginning of the second urbanization in India. The Harappan towns finally disappeared in about 1500 BC. After that, about 1000 years, we do not find any towns in India. With the appearance of towns in Middle Gangetic Basin in the 6th century BC, a second urbanization began in India. Many towns mentioned in Pali and Sanskrit texts such as Kaushambi, Shravasti, Ayodhya, Kapilavastu, Varanasi, Vaishali, Rajagir, Patliputra, Chamba have been excavated, and in each case, signs of habitation and mud structures belonging to the advent of the NBP phase or its middle have been found. Wooden palisades have been found in Patna, and these possibly belong to Maurya or pre-Mauryan times. Some of these towns were also fortified. Houses were mostly made of mud brick and wood, which naturally have perished in the moist climate of the middle Gangetic Basin. Although 7-storied palaces are mentioned in Pali texts, they have not been discovered anywhere. Structures excavated so far are generally unimpressive, but together with the other material remains, they indicate great increase in population when compared with the painted grey settlements. Many towns were seats of government, but whatever be the causes of their origin, they eventually turned out to be the markets and came to be inhabited by artisans and merchants. At some places, there was a concentration of artisans. Sadalaputta at Vaishali had 500 potters' shop. Both artisans and merchants were organized into guilds under respective headman. We hear of 18 guilds of artisans, but only the guilds of smiths, carpenters, leather workers, and painters are specified. Both artisans and merchants lived in fixed localities in towns. We hear of Vessas or Merchants Street in Varanasi. Similarly, we hear of the street of ivory workers. Thus, specialization in crafts developed on account of the guild system as well as localization. Generally, crafts were hereditary, and the son learned his family trade from the father. Okay. Figure 9 shows the India NBP sites. Okay. Distribution of northern black polished ware. The products of the crafts were carried over long distances by merchants. We repeatedly hear of 500 cartloads of goods. These contained fine textile goods, ivory objects, ports, etc. All the important cities of the period were situated on river banks and trade routes and connected with one another. Shravasti was linked with both Kaushambi and Varanasi. The latter was considered to be a great center of trade in the age of Buddha. The route from Shravasti passed eastward and southward through Kapilavastu and Kushinara and came to Vaishali. The traders crossed the Ganga near Patna and went to Rajgir. They also went by Ganga river to Chamba near modern Bhagalpur. If we believe the Jataka stories, the traders of Kosala and Magadha went via Mathura as far northward as Taxila. Similarly, from Mathura they went to Ujjain and the Gujarat coast. Trade was facilitated by the use of money. The terms Nishka and Shadamana in the Vedic texts are taken to be names of coins, but coins actually found are not earlier than the 6th century BC. It seems that in Vedic times, exchange was carried on through means of barter, and sometimes cattle served the purpose of currency. Coins made of metal appear first in the age of Gautama Buddha. The earliest are made largely of silver, though a few coppers also appear. They are called punch marked because pieces of these metals were punched with certain marks such as hill, trees, fish, bull, elephant, crescent, etc. The earliest hoards of these coins have been found in eastern Uttar Pradesh and Magadha, although some early coins are also found in Taxila. The Pali texts indicate plentiful use of money and show that wages and prices were paid in it. The use of money had become so universal that even the price of a dead mouse was estimated in it. It is likely that writing started a couple of centuries before Ashoka and contributed to trade. The earliest records were probably not written on stone and metal and have therefore perished. Writing led to the compilation of not only laws and rituals but also facilitated bookkeeping, which was so essential to trade, tax collection, and the keeping of a large professional army. The period produced texts dealing with sophisticated measurement, Sula Sutras, which presuppose writing and which may have helped the demarcation of fields and houses. Although rural settlements belong to the NBP phase, have not been excavated, we cannot think of the beginnings of the crafts, commerce, and urbanization in the middle Gangetic basin without a strong rural base. Princes, priests, artisans, traders, administrators, military personnel, and numerous other functionaries could not live in towns unless taxes, tributes, and tithes were available in sufficient measure to support them. Non-agriculturalists living in towns had to be fed by agriculturalists living in villages. In return, artisans and traders living in towns made tools, clothes, etc. available to the rural folk. We hear of a village trader depositing 500 plows with a town merchant. Obviously, there were iron plowshares. From the NBP phase in Kaushambi, iron tools consisting of axes, adzes, knives, razors, nails, sickles, etc. have been discovered. A good number of them belong to the early layers of NBP phase and were probably meant for the use of the peasants who bought them by paying in cash or kind. Numerous villages are mentioned in the Pali texts, and towns seem to have been situated amidst the clusters of villages. It seems that the nucleated rural settlement in which all people settled at one place and had their agricultural land, mostly outside the settlement, first appeared in the middle Gangetic basin in the age of Gautama Buddha. The Pali texts speak of the three types of villages. The first category included the typical village inhabited by various castes and communities. Its number seems to have been the largest, and it was headed by a village headman called Bojaga. So Bojaga is known as village headman. Village headman is known as Bojaga. Okay, the second included suburban villages, which were in the nature of craft villages. For instance, a carpenter's village lay in the vicinity of Varanasi. Obviously, these villages served as markets for the other villages and linked the towns with the countryside. The third category consisted of border villages situated on the limits of the countryside which merged into forests. People living in these villages were mainly fowlers and hunters and led a backward life. The village lands were divided into cultivable plots and allotted family wise. Every family cultivated its plots with the help of its members, supplemented by that of agricultural laborers. Fields were fenced and irrigation channels dug collectively by the peasant families under the supervision of the village headman. The, the peasants had to pay 1/6 of their produce as taxes were collected directly by royal agents, and generally there were no intermediate landlords between the peasants on the one hand and the state on the other hand. But some villages were granted to brahmanas and big merchants for their enjoyment. We also hear of large plots of land worked with the help of slaves and agricultural laborers. Rich peasants were called grihapatis, who were almost the same as vaishyas. Okay. Rich peasants were called grihapatis. Okay, rice was the staple cereal produced in the eastern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar in this period. Various types of paddy and paddy fields are described in the Pali texts. The use of the term for transplantation is found in the Pali and Sanskrit texts of the period, and it seems that large-scale paddy transplantation began in the age of the Buddha. Paddy transplantation or wet paddy production enormously added to the yield. In addition, the peasants also produced barley, pulses, millets, cotton, and sugarcane. Agriculture made great advance because of the use of iron plowshare and immense fertility of the alluvium soil in the area between Allahabad and Rajmahal. The place of the technology in promoting rural and urban economy needs to be underlined. Iron played a crucial role in opening the rain-fed forested hard soil area of the middle Ganga basin to clearance, cultivation, and settlement. The Smiths knew how to harden iron tools. Some tools from Rajghat, Varanasi show that they were made out of the iron ores obtained from Singhbum and Mayurganj. It thus appears that people came to be acquainted with the richest iron mines in the country, which was bound to increase the supply of tools for the crafts and agriculture. The picture of economy that emerges from a study of material remains. And the Pali text is much different from the rural economy of the later Vedic times in western Uttar Pradesh, or the nature of the economy of a few Chalcolithic communities found in some parts of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. We notice for the first time an advanced food processing producing economy spread over the alluvial soil of the mid-Gangetic basin and the beginning of urban economy in this area. It was an economy which provided subsistence not only to direct producers but also to many others were not farmers or artisans. This made possible collection of the taxes and maintenance of armies on a long-term basis and created conditions in which large territorial states could be formed and sustained. Administrative system. Although we hear of many states in this period, only Kosala and Magadha emerged as powerful. Only Kosala and Magadha, MK. Magadha and Kosala. Okay, both of them were ruled by hereditary monarchs belonging to Kshatriya Varna. The Jatakas or the stories related to previous births of Buddha tells us that oppressive kings and their chief priests were expelled by the people and the new kings were installed. But occasions of expulsion were as rare as those election. The king enjoyed the highest official status and special protection of his person and property. He yielded ground only to great religious leaders of the stature of the Buddha. The king was primarily the warlord who led his kingdom from victory to victory. This is well illustrated by the careers of Bimbisara and Ajatashatru. Okay. The kings ruled with the help of officials, both high and low. Higher officials were called Mahamatras, higher officials, Mahamatras, and they performed various functions such as that of those of minister, Mandrin, commander, Sena Nayaga, judge, chief accountant, and head of the royal harem. It is likely or that a class of officers called Ayuktas also performed similar functions in some of the states. The kings carried on administration with the help of the officers. Varsakara of Magadha and Dirgacharayana of Kosala. Varsakara of Magadha and Dirgacharayana of Kosala were effective and influential ministers. The first succeeded in sowing seeds of dissension in the ranks of Lichavis of Vaishali and enabled Ajatashatru to conquer the republic. The second Dirgacharayana rendered help to the king of Kosala. Okay. First was Varsakara of Magadha. Okay. It seems that high officers and ministers were largely recruited from priestly class of the Brahmanas. Generally, they do not seem to have been belonged to the clan of the king. In both Kosala and Magadha, despite the use of punch-marked coins made of silver, influential Brahmanas and Sethis were paid by the grant of the revenue of villages. In doing so, the king do not have to obtain the consent of the clan as was the case in later Vedic times, but the beneficiaries were granted only revenue and they were not given any administrative authority. The rural administration was in the hands of village headmen. In the beginning, the headman functioned as leaders of the tribal regiments, and so they were called Gramini, which means the leader of Grama or tribal military unit. As life became sedentary and plough cultivation well established, tribal contingents settled down to agriculture. The Gramini therefore was transformed into a village headman. In pre-Mauryan times, the village headman were known by different titles such as Grama Bojaga, Gramini or Gramiga. 86,000 Gramigas are said to have been summoned by Bimbisara. The number may be conventional, but it shows that the village headman enjoyed considerable importance and had direct links with the kings. The village headman assessed and collected the taxes from the villagers, and they also maintained law and order in their locality. Sometimes oppressive headmen were taken to task by the villagers. Army and taxation. The real increase in state power is indicated by the formation of a large professional army. At the time of Alexander's invasion, the Nanda ruler of Magadha kept 20,000 cavalry, 2 lakh infantry, 2,000 horse chariots, and about 4,000 elephants. The chariots were losing their importance, not only in northeast but also in northwest India, where they had been introduced by the Aryans. Very few elephants were maintained by the rulers of the states in northwest India, though some of them maintained as many horses as the Magadhan king did. The possession of numerous elephants have an edge to the Magadhan princes. The large long service army had to be fed by the state exchequer. We are told that the Nandas possessed enormous wealth, which must have enabled them to support the army. But we have no clear idea of the measures by which they raised taxes from the people. The fiscal system was established on a firm basis. Warriors and priests, that is, the Kshatriyas and Brahmanas, were exempted from payment of taxes. And the burden fell on the peasants, who were mainly Vaishyas or Grihapatis. Bali, a voluntary payment made by the tribesmen to their chiefs in Vedic times, became a compulsory payment to be made by the peasant in the age of Buddha, and officers called Bali Sadagas were appointed to collect it. It seems that 1/6 of the produce was collected as tax by the king from the peasants. Taxes were assessed and collected by royal agents with the help of village headman. The advent of writing may have helped the assessment and collection of taxes. The discovery of many hoards of punch-marked coins suggests that payment was made in both cash and kind. In northeastern India, payment was made in paddy. In addition to these taxes, the peasants were subjected to forced labor for royal work. The birth stories of the Buddha speak of cases in which peasants left the country of the king in order to escape the oppressive burden of taxes. Artisans and traders also had to pay taxes. Artisans were made to work for a day in a month for the king, and the traders had to pay customs on the sale of their commodities. The tolls were collected by officers known as Saulkiga or Sulkadyaksha. Saulkiga or Sulkadyaksha. The kings of the period no longer summoned the Sabha and Samiti. Popular assemblies had practically disappeared in post-Vedic times. Since they were essentially tribal institutions, they decayed and disappeared as tribes disintegrated into Varnas and lost their identity. Their place was taken by Varna and caste groups, and so caste laws and customs were given due weight by the writers of the law books. However, these regulations were mainly confined to social matters. Popular assemblies could succeed only in small kingdoms. Small kingdoms where members of the tribe could easily be summoned, as may have been the case in the Vedic period. With the emergence of the large states of Kosala and Magadha, it was not possible to hold big assemblies attended by people belonging to different social classes and different parts of the empire. This sheer difficulty of communication made regular meetings impossible. Further being tribal, the old assembly could not find place for many non-Vedic people who lived in the new kingdoms. The changed circumstances, therefore, were not congenial for the continuance of the old assemblies. Instead, in this period, we hear of a small body called Parishad, consisting exclusively of the Brahmanas. So, a small body called Parishad consisting exclusively of the Brahmanas. Even in this period, assemblies were there, but not in the monarchies. They flourished in the smaller republican states of the Shakyas and Lichavis, etc. Next, the Republican experiment. The Republican system of government existed in either the Indus Basin or in the foothills of Himalaya in eastern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. The republics in the Indus Basin may have been remnants of the Vedic tribes, although some monarchies may have been followed by republics. In some cases, in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, people were possibly inspired by the old ideals of tribal equality, which did not give much prominence to the Raja. In the republics, real power lay in the hands of tribal oligarchies. In the republics of Shakyas and Lichavis, the ruling class belonged to same clan and same Varna. Although in the case of Lichavis of Vaishali, 7707 Rajas sat on the assembly held in Mottehal. The Brahmanas were not included in this group. In post-modern times, in the republics of the Malavas and Shudragas, the Kshatriyas and the Brahmanas were given citizenship, but slaves and hired laborers were excluded from it. In a state situated on the Bias River in Punjab, membership was restricted to those who could not supply at least one elephant to the state. This was a typical oligarchy in the Indus Basin. The administrative machinery of the Shakyas and Lichavis was simple. It consisted of Raja, Ubaraja, Vice King, Senapati Commander, and Bandakariga, Treasurer. We hear of as many as 7 courts trying for say we hear of as many as 7 courts for trying the same case one after another in the Lichavi Republic. But this seems to be too good to be true. In any case, certain states in the age of the Buddha were not ruled by hereditary kings, but by persons who were all responsible to the assemblies. Thus, although the people living in ancient republics may not have shared political power equally, the republican tradition in the country is as old as the age of the Buddha. The republics differed from the monarchies in several ways. In the monarchies, the king claimed to be the sole recipient of revenue from the peasants. But in the republics, this claim was advanced by every tribal oligarch who was known as Raja. Each one of the 7707 Lichavi Rajas maintained his storehouse and apparatus of administration. Again, every monarchy maintained its regular standing army and did not permit any group or groups of people to keep arms within its boundaries. But in a tribal oligarchy, each Raja was free to maintain his own little army under his Senapati so that each of them could compete with the other. The Brahmanas exercised great influence in the monarchy, but they had no place in the early republics, nor did they recognize these states in their law books. Finally, the main difference between a monarchy and republic lay in the fact that the latter functioned under the leadership of oligarchic assemblies and not of an individual, as was the case with the former. The republican tradition became feeble from the Maurya period. Even in the pre-Maurya times, monarchies were far stronger and common. Naturally, ancient thinkers looked upon kingship as the common and most important form of government. To them, the state, government, and kingship meant the same thing. Since the state was well established in the age of the Buddha, thinkers began to speculate about its possible origins. The Digha Nikaya, one of the earliest Buddhist Pali texts, points out that in the earliest stage, human beings lived happily. Gradually, they came to have private property and set up house with their wives. So they began to quarrel over property and women. In order to put an end to this quarrel, they elected a chief who would maintain law and order and protect people. In return for protection, the people promised to give to the chief a part of their paddy. This chief came to be called king, and this is how kingship or the state originated. Okay, social orders and legislation. The Indian legal and judicial system originated in this period. Formerly, people were governed in the tribal law, which did not recognize any class distinction. But by now, the tribal communities had been clearly divided into four classes: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. So the Dharma Sutras laid down the duties of each of the four Varna, and the civil and criminal law came to be based on the Varna division. The higher the Varna, the purer it was, and the higher was the order of moral conduct expected by civil and criminal law. All kinds of disabilities were imposed on the Shudras and relegated they were deprived of religious and legal rights and relegated to the lowest position in the society. They could not be invested in Upanayana. Crimes committed by them against Brahmanas and others were punished severely. On the other hand, the crimes committed against Shudras were punished lightly. The lawgivers emphasized the fiction that the Shudras were born from the feet of the Creator. So members of the higher Varnas, especially the Brahmanas, shunned the company of the Shudra, avoided the food touched by him, and refused to enter into marriage relations with him. He could not be appointed to high posts, and above all, he was specifically asked to serve the twice born as slave, artisan, and agricultural labor. In this laborer, in this respect, even Jainism and Buddhism did not make any substantial change in the position of the Shudras, although they could be admitted to the new religious orders. Their general position continued to be low. It is said that the Gautama Buddha visited the assemblies of the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, and the Grihapatis or householders. But the assembly of the Shudras is not mentioned in this connection. Civil and criminal law was administered by royal agents who inflicted rough and ready punishments such as scourging, beheading, tearing out of the tongue, etc. In many cases, punishments for criminal offenses were governed by the idea of revenge. It meant tooth for tooth and eye for eye, although the Brahmanical law books took into account the social status of the different Varnas in framing their laws. They did not ignore the customs of those non Vedic tribal groups who were gradually absorbed in the Brahmanical social order, which went on expanding as a result of the conquests. Some of these indigenous tribals were given fictitious social origins, and what is important, they were allowed to be governed by their own customs. The age of the Buddha is important because ancient Indian polity, economy, and society really took help in this period. Agriculture based on the use of iron tools in alluvial areas gave rise to advanced food producing economy, particularly in eastern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. It was possible to collect taxes from the peasants, and on the basis of regular taxes and tributes, large states could be founded. In order to continue this system, the Varna order was devised, and the functions of each Varna were clearly laid down. According to this system, rulers and fighters were called Kshatriyas, priests and teachers. Rulers were and fighters were called Kshatriyas. Priests and teachers were called Brahmanas. Peasants and taxpayers were called Vaishyas. And those who served all these three classes as laborers were called Shudras. So we have completed chapter 12. In the next video, we will discuss chapter 13, the age of the Mauryas. Okay, thank you for listening me. We'll see you next class. Thank you very much.